Alright guys, this is mostly for the people who were not able to be here today, whether they were on vacation or sick or whatever. That's what this is for. But it also has the information for those of you who were here to go ahead and fill out the remaining parts of the chart. So where I want to begin is by taking a look at this object. And I want you to go ahead and take a few seconds right now and write down a guess in your notes. Okay, there are notes on Blended School, cell theory notes under the cell theory. I want you to go ahead and write down your guess for what this object is. Pause the video, take a couple of seconds, write it down. Okay, now after you have written down your guesses, I want you to go ahead and watch this video, also located on Blended Schools. I love this video. It's fun. It's entertaining. Go ahead and watch this video, and then hopefully that will answer your question, and then we'll get back to that object. So pause me and go back and watch the video on Blended Schools. Okay, and we're back. Hopefully you enjoyed that video, and I want to talk a little bit about this. As you can probably tell from that video, this ends up being a microscope. It was invented by Anton van Leeuwenhoek. When I first saw it, I thought it was some sort of medieval torture device. Wasn't really sure. I had to go and ask Mr. Thompson what exactly he thought it was, but it ends up being Anton van Leeuwenhoek's microscope. And what was really cool about this microscope is that it was so much more powerful than everything else that was going on at that time. It was capable of measuring something at 250 times what our eyes can see, and anything else that was happening at that time was measured at about 100. So it was significantly more detailed, significantly more magnified to see things through Van Leeuwenhoek's microscope than anybody else's. Really cool stuff. Okay, now again, I want you to pause the video. Take a couple of seconds. We've looked at cells. We've started to talk about them a little bit. We've gone through some of the cell theory. You've at least watched the video. I want you to pause the video, come up with your own definition of a cell. Okay, take 30 seconds, pause the video, go. All right, hopefully you took that time. You wrote down your own definition. At this point, I'm going to give you ours. Our definition of a cell is that it is the smallest unit of a living thing that can perform all of life's processes. So anything from making an adjustment to adapting to using energy to reproducing, all of those characteristics of life, the cell can do. You're made up of trillions of cells, and they're all have a different specialty to aid you in living your life processes. At the same time, they can function all of their own. Now, a lot of you that have already done this activity know exactly what to do at this point, but if you weren't here, if you look at your notes, you can see there's 2 more pages after that first one. Now that we've got our definition of the cell, there's 2 more pages. One has a whole bunch of terms and dates and discoveries and stuff like that on it, and the next one has some scientists and some boxes and a bunch of blank spaces. I need you to do some research on the internet and attempt to match these discoveries, terms, dates, definitions, whatever they are.
Excuse the interruption for the afternoon announcement.
Okay, so I want you to take a little bit of time, and I want you to go through and match the terms, dates, definitions with the scientists in the correct spot. Okay, take some time. It should take you no longer than 20 minutes to do that. And when you're done with that, you can come back here and check your answers. Pause the video and take care of that. Okay, at this point you have gone through and you have looked at the different scientists. You have tried to match them up. Now I'm going to go ahead and give you that information. Very first person we get to is Robert Hooke. And if you remember from the video, Robert Hooke had some problems with other scientists of his time. Specifically, Sir Isaac Newton and him did not get along. And the reason was because they were kind of doing a lot of the same things. But one of the good things that Robert Hooke is known for is he is known for the discovery of cells while looking at cork, and that happened in 1663. Now we looked at some cork. Okay, now it didn't exactly look like this. This is what Robert Hooke's version looked like, but we looked at some cork, or we looked up a picture of cork. I couldn't actually get cork in the room, but you still got to look at the same type of plant that the very first person to look at cells looked at, which is really cool. Now he named them cells because in Latin the term cellula means small rooms. Okay, and that comes from, the monks and the little rooms that they stayed in their monasteries. Our second guy, Francesco Reddy, is an Italian scientist, and his big thing was to disprove spontaneous generation. Now, spontaneous generation was something that was thought occurred a lot early on. Spontaneous generation was essentially that all life can appear from life. So what Reddy did was that he designed an experiment. He was the first person to design a controlled experiment. Okay, and what he did was he came up with this experiment where he would put meat inside of a flask. And according to spontaneous generation, if that flask is sealed, no matter what happens, we should get flies because life would come from something that was living or formerly alive, which would be the meat. So flies should appear. When they didn't, he knew that spontaneous generation was impossible. When he opened it, the flies obviously came in, they landed, they laid their eggs, and more flies appeared. Same thing over here with the flask covered with the gauze. Okay, the flies are attracted to the meat, they land on top of it, they lay their eggs. But the big point here is that the flies did not come from the meat, because if they did, they would have been inside the sealed flask. Now, Schleiden, Schwann, and Virchow were all German scientists, and Schleiden was a botanist, so he looked at plants, and Schwann was an animal, or studied animal cells. And both of them kind of got together and decided that, well, all plants are made of cells, and all animals are made of cells. So together they combined to say that all living things are made of cells. And the third guy in here, Rudolf Virchow, kind of came in towards the end when Schleiden and Schwann couldn't get together on the fact that all cells come from pre-existing cells. Schwann believed that, but Schleiden said that he thought that cells came from a kind of like a spontaneous generation type thing where they just kind of appeared, free cell formation. Okay, Virchow came in with evidence saying that new cells only come from pre-existing cells. Now, my favorite name in the world to say is Anton van Leeuwenhoek. He was in 1674. The Dutch scientist, he was the one that made that kind of medieval torture device looking microscope, and he looked at pond water. And he also looked at his own teeth scrapings. He was looking at bacteria on his teeth, which is kind of gross if you think about it, but he was the first person to discover bacteria. He looked at his teeth scrapings and he called them animalcules, which we later called bacteria. The last person we're going to talk about is Louis Pasteur. And Louis Pasteur in the mid-1800s was a French scientist who again was looking at this concept of spontaneous generation. And so what he did was he demonstrated that life only came from other life. And so the idea here was that he had a curved neck flask and an open and a non-curved neck flask, and he boiled the broth for both of them. Now you see here the non-curved neck flask, microorganisms after they had been boiled out ended up forming back in the broth. And because of that formation, give me one sec, hold on, pause. Back to it, but as you can see, if the curved neck is removed, that provides an opening for bacteria to come in. So you end up getting these microorganisms that grow inside of the broth. Okay, so life comes from other life. Microorganisms come in here and we get a cloudy solution where more microorganisms are being produced. However, if we have the curved neck where the microorganisms try to come into the curved neck, they can't get there. They can't make it into the broth. And so no microorganisms end up forming. So this idea of spontaneous generation is again denied and demonstrated that it's not true, but that life only comes from the other life. Okay? Together, all of these scientists produce what we call the cell theory, which come based on a specific amount of facts. You have the cell is the basic unit of all living things. All organisms are composed of one or more cells, and all cells come from existing cells, which is what we just showed you in the last slide. Your homework, and I jazzed this one up a little bit for those of you who were in class today. Hopefully it works. So I attempted to jazz this one up a little bit more than what it was last time. Here's your homework. I added a little bit of music to it this time. A little loud. Okay? Due Monday is Battlemania. Okay? It is your job to pick who is the scientist that is most influential in the cell theory. You're going to pin two of them against each other. Okay? That's step number one. Pick two scientists or group of scientists as your top two contenders for being the most influential in the cell theory. Step two is going to be to write a small biography for your top two. Okay, so down here, where are they from, when they were born. Back to the music. Okay, finish up writing your biography, where they're from, when they were born, their major accomplishments. If they're the heavyweight championship of the cell world, go ahead and write that. Then your final step, and you'll see it on the actual document on Blended Schools, is to write a paragraph, 5 sentences of who would win the battle to be named the most influential scientist in the formation of the cell theory. Make sure you provide details as to why they would be champion and what makes them better than their other challenger. Okay? That is due by Monday, December 1st. I look forward to it on Doctopus. Alright guys, that is it for me. Enjoy.